profiles of all students with the goal of becoming skilled, lifelong readers. Our mission is to advance the awareness, understanding, and use of evidence-aligned reading instruction. We are grateful to share that this three-part series is sponsored by Zaner Bloser, we will hear from later this evening. Please stay on for the full presentation, after which you'll be able to access a certificate toward professional development points. And super excited to say that you will be among the first to hear about a very exciting opportunity coming to Virginia this February. You will be the first to hear about that. You won't want to miss what we have to share. In that spirit, we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Molly Ness, who is a former classroom teacher, a reading researcher, and a teacher educator. She spent 16 years as an associate professor at Fordham University in New York City. The author of 6 books, Molly served on the board of directors for the International Literacy Association on the New York State Dyslexia Task Force. Dr. Ness has extensive experience in reading clinics, consulting with school districts, leading professional development, and advising school systems on research-based reading instruction. She provided literacy leadership for nationally recognized literacy nonprofits, as well as major educational publishers. A frequent speaker and presenter, her happy place is translating the science of reading to schools and teachers. In 2024, she founded Dirigo, a literacy consulting firm supporting schools, districts, and states align with and implement the science of reading. When she is not reading and writing about reading and writing, Dr. Ness is driving her ice hockey obsessed teenage daughter to the rink and learning how to fly fish or hiking with her poorly behaved golden doodle. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Ness. We are so glad that you're here to chat about making words stick.
Well, thank you for having me, Virginia. And in many ways, this is returning home to me, although I'm not returning in person, I'm just returning virtually. I did my doctorate in reading education at the University of Virginia, so I really do believe so much of my knowledge and work in literacy started down in Charlottesville, and it's so fun to see those of you from other states popping up. I am extensively involved in the Reading League chapter both in New York and in Maine, and I love seeing the collaboration between all of these different chapters, all with the same purpose, which is empowering teachers to provide the best possible literacy instruction. So thank you for taking some time out of your evening to talk about orthographic mapping. Um, Thank you to those of you who are watching this perhaps as a recording. You guys every day have the most important job possible, which is changing human brains so that they can learn to read. And I just think that is a wildly awesome responsibility. I mean, awesome, not as like the 80s super great, but like literally worthy of awe that reading changes the human brain. You're seeing the cover of this book that came out in May. You're also seeing my contact information and my dear colleague, Katie Pace Miles, who is the most brilliant and generous and just lovely human being. So when this book came out, right before it came out, my book group, my personal book group, like my, sit around and drink wine and talk about Reese Witherspoon selections. We were at the point in the evening where we were bickering over what book to choose next. And so this was, late, maybe or April or March, late March or April. And somebody says, well, Molly's book is coming out in May. Why don't we read that? And the whole crowd swivels to turn them in. Well, what's it about? And I go, orthographic mapping. And the whole crowd was like, wah, wah. I was like, don't worry, we can go with, somebody else's selection. So I might be in the virtual room with the only people who actually are excited about orthographic mapping. So thank you for being a geek with me. So the way that I'm planning this three-part process is tonight I'm going to talk really about the what, the why, the how of orthographic mapping. It is not a new topic. It has been in the peer-reviewed research since the mid-90s, but not yet really commonplace and not yet really made accessible. And that's what Katie and I really wanted to do in this book, is take this knowledge, which is behind academic paywalls in these, peer-reviewed journals, and really make it accessible for everybody who has the awesome responsibility of changing human brains. Um, I'm going to talk about the practical implications the next time we meet, which I believe is at the start of 2026. And then I will have sort of an open chat, kind of open office hours for our last time today. You will be getting both in the link and I assume by email a PDF that is a lot of the images that you'll see here. So it should also have our contact information. Please feel free to follow up and request any of the articles or shoot questions along. I always joke that I will happily violate copyright law and send you any of the articles that are behind paywalls. So I get very frustrated when you see an article and you're like, that sounds super interesting. Let me Google it and I can find it. And then you come to this button that says, like, click here for $40, you can have the PDF. I say this as somebody who has written those articles. The author doesn't see a single penny of that $40. So email me if any of the research that you see cited you want to read. The great irony and true story, my sister is actually a copyright lawyer. And so when she finds out that I'm like taking these articles and like distributing them, she's ready to throw me in copyright prison. So our Thanksgiving meal in a couple weeks should be should be interesting. If the worst thing I've ever done is share copyrighted materials to teachers, well, I'm okay with that being on my tombstone. So let's get started with this unbelievable fact that all of us in this virtual room, have a lexicon, kind of a mental Rolodex of about 50,000 words that we instantly automatically recognize. In fact, the neural pathways, the reading circuitry is so sort of ingrained in our brains that we can't kind of turn it off. Meaning, if you're in your car tonight and you drive past a billboard or a street sign, without even knowing it, you read it. That's just how ingrained reading is for proficient adults. And obviously, that's where we want the end goal for our students to be. So, if I were to ask you on a daily basis, what did you read today? Chances are probably like 98% of the words that you read today were sight words. You instantly decoded them. You automatically recognized them. You, in fact, were very unlikely to have to actually decode anything. Now, maybe you had to decode a proper noun, a town name, a student's last name, but as adults, we all have about 50,000 words that we instantly recognize. And so what does that mean and why is it important? Well, first of all, it's really kind of the on-ramp to comprehension. It is the process by which we can take that precious cognitive energy and move it away from the laborious process of decoding to get to fluency. And so the book that we wrote and the work around orthographic mapping tries to uncover, well, how did those 50,000 words get there? They did not get there through memorization. It's just simply not possible to memorize that many words. So let me start with an experience that I had as a reader. I already gave away the tidbit that I tend to, when I'm not reading academic journals, read sort of chick lit and beach reads and murder mysteries and things like that. And so a couple summers ago, I was reading this book that I absolutely unabashedly had chosen because it had the Reese Witherspoon sticker, and I tend to like what she chooses. So I'm 3 pages in, and the setting that I'm already just enveloped in is this sort of swampy bog kind of marsh thing. There's a character who's kayaking. We have this gorgeous scene where the tides are coming in and out, and birds are nesting. And I come to this sentence that's describing the action in this setting. And I read this. She looked down at the freshly piled sand beside her, then out to the fog, blanketing and my brain kind of does that noise that's like the record screech. Because that word that starts with an SL I don't know how to pronounce it. Now, I had enough context at this point through my receptive vocabulary to know that this word likely had to do with this setting. The tides, the kayaking, the bogs and the marsh and the swampy water, but I can't really say it. And I'm not really given any help from the word itself because this SLOUGH word is one of those, all right, I got nothing on this. Is it like cough? Is it slough like rough? Is it slew like through? Is it slaw like bought? Like, so I got nothing here. And I'm a reading geek. I can't let this go. Normal people, they would just, keep reading, but I'm a geek, so I have to do my geeky thing, which many of you, I would assume, would probably do. And I look it up. So I go to my favorite online dictionary, and first of all, I get the visual representation, like check, I was pretty correct about the meaning and the semantics of this word. I know it's a swamp. But then I get this gorgeous little blue sound icon, which of course, being the geek, I click it and it gives me the phonological representation. I now know the word is slew. And at this point, I have now a representation of the word. I've got how the word looks, its orthography. I've got its phonology because I got it from the clicking the audio button, and I found myself just as a natural reading process. When they said it, I sort of said it under my breath. And then I've got what the word means, but not just what it means, not just its dictionary definition. I have the visual representation and the associated characteristics and the semantic networks. And all of these things come together for me to map the word so that the next time I come to this word, and it's an important word in the book because it's the main setting, I instantly recognize it. So that trifecta is a demonstration of orthographic mapping. Now, I bring up this example because I want us to be aware that orthographic mapping is not just a K through 2 thing. It doesn't just occur for our developing readers or our beginning readers. Clearly, I'm an adult proficient reader, and I went through this process to orthographically map this word. Now, we got to know a little bit about the reading brain to understand why those three things matter and how they come together in the circuitry of the reading brain to have that word become a word that is now in my sight vocabulary. And until I knew about the reading brain, and I absolutely confess, when I was a professor, I didn't really teach my future students, my pre-service teacher, my early career teacher, very much about the reading brain. It just wasn't commonplace to really know about it, talk about it, include it in coursework. And now, when I look back, I understand with the knowledge of the reading brain why some of the things that I did to help my students didn't make words stick. So we start the book with me talking about how I taught spelling as the good old fashioned, here's your spelling words, write them 3 times, put them in alphabetical order, that sort of thing. And Katie did the whole, when she was a first grade teacher, she did the whole flashcards, and we both had the experience of words maybe sticking for the spelling test on Friday or maybe the flashcard, but then not transferring to writing or transferring to text. You know this on the index card. How do you not know it in the book? Well, because we weren't really mapping our instruction with the circuitry that is the reading brain. And I would assume some of us are relatively familiar with the reading brain, so I'll go over it super quick. There's a great video that Scholastic put out if you're not familiar with it. But really what happens, and I'll try to add a couple little tidbits that I'm sort of geeking out now about, is the first part that we really see this sort of activation in is the letterbox. What we see right above the nape of our neck in that purple area. Dehaan would call it the visual word form area or the letterbox. Kind of interestingly, this is the area of the brain that biologically was really adapted for facial recognition. There's obviously an evolutionary advantage to recognizing the faces of caretakers who are meant for your safety. So you can kind of see how over millions of years, neurons recycle and now are responsible for the recognition of letters, literally saying the letter is a letter I know. It's not a random squiggle on the page. It's not a character in the Greek alphabet. It's not a number. Well, then, and actually, one of the things that I'm super interested in now is we're starting to see research from folks like Jason Yateman over at Stanford University that are showing that kids with dyslexia have underdeveloped visual word form areas, literally smaller and less developed. Next up is the parietal lobe that is really responsible for the hard work of phoneme grapheme correspondence or linking letters and sounds. If you're working with K through 2 kids, or if you're working with kids who are not yet proficient in that process, this is the highway that is under heavy construction. A lot of potholes here. And then finally, when we activate the occipital and the parietal lobe, all we've got is the word and its sound, but we don't yet have a context for it. And that work happens in these two areas that you see sort of in the aqua and the yellow, the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area, which are connected by the articulate fasciculus. They're responsible for language comprehension, the meaning of the word, the semantic relations of the word, the characteristics of the word. So if it's a word that is a short CVC word, I just saw Carolyn Strom from NYU present at Reading League a few weeks ago, and she shared this amazing fact that CVC words, we assume they're super simplistic because, 3 letters, pretty easy. Something like 80% of CVC words are multiple meaning words. So if we are lifting a multiple meaning a CVC word off the page, something like lap, well, these areas that are in the turquoise and the yellow are going to help us know, is that how a kitten drinks its milk? Is that the lap, like you're sitting in my lap? Is that a lap around the track? And what I'm talking about in this really linear fashion, we know, of course, happens so quickly and so effortlessly that no Olympic judge, when the February Olympics start, can clock it with their stopwatch because it's just that effortless and instantaneous. So let me keep talking a little bit about these two things that we don't always talk about. We know that when we need to decode a word, where I had to get the phonology of the word, do the phoneme grapheme correspondence for SLU, I was relying on the dorsal pathway, which is really going to be the pathway that's working with the phoneme grapheme correspondence. But when we see a word and we instantly recognize the word, the land that you and I, as adult proficient readers, live in, that's the ventral pathway. And the ventral pathway is obviously more efficient, and it's what allots that cognitive energy so that we can get to comprehension. Now, most of our students are activating the dorsal pathway, which I always remember the two because the D in dorsal stands for D in decoding, and they're working on that pathway, which is more laborious. And we see that if you're working with K through 2 kids and they're slogging through stuff, that's because they're using that dorsal pathway. So I'm going to pause this actually and keep going. But I am going to show a video later so you don't just have to hear my voice, you get to hear Katie's as well. To give you this definition, we're talking about orthographic mapping as this cognitive process. And what we mean by this cognitive process is it happens behind the scenes. And I'm seeing more and more conversation about orthographic mapping happening on things like social media. People are picking up the term. It's becoming a little bit more popular. I would love to say it's because of, our brilliant book. Clearly it's not, but for whatever rhyme or reason, people are talking about it, which is awesome. But I hear this misconception of like, help me orthographically map a word for kids, or we're going to do some orthographic mapping activities, which then makes me think like, we're standing in front of kids and being like, all right, take out your orthographic mapping workbook. No, it's a behind the scenes process. It's this cognitive process. And why does it matter? Well, it's the process by which words become stored in long-term memory so that we can automatically retrieve them by sight. Let's dig into that a little bit more. We're standing, of course, on the shoulders of Linnea Airy, the great Linnea Airy, who is the woman must like produce peer-reviewed research in her sleep. Actually, last June, Katie and I gave a very similar talk to the Reading League chapter of New York. It was this lovely school, and Linnea was in the second row. And there's nothing like the anxiety about presenting the research to the researcher. Actually, at the end of the talk, somebody in the audience posed a great question, and we actually just said, Linnea, would you like to take this one? And we handed the microphone to her. Because she really is the pioneer of this. And if you were at Reading League in Chicago, you also had the work of David Scher, who, of course, has contributed as well. But really, the classic definition of this orthographic mapping, again, cognitive process of forming grapheme, phoneme, letter sound connections to bond spelling, pronunciation, and meaning. So again, that trifecta of the spelling and the pronunciation, that sound icon that I had to click, and then not just the meaning, but its semantic relations, its examples and non-examples and all of those other things. And again, it's that long-term memory. So you've likely seen some version of this where we see the word. In order for that word to be in our long-term memory, we go through this process of the phoneme grapheme correspondence. That's where the breakdown happened for me when I saw that unfamiliar word slew. Now then you then have to connect it to something you already know, which for many of our kids is really challenging. They see a word like mitten and they may or may not have the language comprehension to know what that word is. And when they decode it, the decoding of it on the page doesn't always match how it's stored in their brain, the language around it. So it's that struggle to, oh, mitten, I know what you mean. And you've likely seen some version of this. Linnea is very clear that it's the spelling and the pronunciation which serve as the glue, which then, when are connected to the meaning, that's what facilitates this long-term process to get those 50,000 words on average into our long-term memory. Oh, sorry, there's my poorly behaved golden doodle parking in the background. So let's hear from Katie for a second. She's going to explain it a little bit more. Know that Katie is the best of the best. She was Linnea's doctoral student. So she is really Linnea's prodigy.
Hey everyone, I'm Molly, and I am going to quickly talk through what we mean by orthographic mapping, as well as a little bit of why it matters. But I'm first going to start by giving you an experience that happened to me as a reader. So as a proficient adult, think about what you're reading on an everyday basis, chances are you're really not doing very much decoding. Maybe there's a name of a town or a last name of somebody on your class roster that you decode. But for the vast majority of words that we encounter, we've already orthographically mapped those words so that we're not using any cognitive energy to lift them off the page. This past summer, I was reading a book that introduced me to a word that was unfamiliar to me. I had to decode it. So you're going to see the word flash on the screen. So take a look at it. What's the word? So as I was reading the passage, I could understand what the word was. I had enough context clues. I was reading a murder mystery about a body that was found in this swampy marsh with these bogs and this mud and silt. So I understood what the word meant, but I didn't know how to pronounce it. Because when you look at that word, it ends in O-U-G-H. And there are so many different ways to pronounce the O-U-G-H. Is it like dough? Or is it like off? There's so many different variations. And so to orthographically map that word so that it was instant and I didn't have to spend any more time instantly decoding it, I went to my favorite online dictionary and I pushed the sound icon. I got a phonological representation of the word. In other words, I found out that most of us pronounce that word S-L-O-U-G-H as slew. So now I was able to orthographically map that word. I could instantly recognize it. I had the phonological understanding, the phoneme grapheme understanding of the how the sounds and the letters mapped onto each other, and I knew the meaning. So that the next time I encountered that word in that same book, instant recognition. So orthographic mapping is the process by which that happens for readers. We want to have words orthographically mapped so that we can get to fluency. The more words I have that are automatically recognized, the more I am able to get to comprehension because the less work I'm having to do to decode words.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm here to discuss the term orthographic mapping. There's just a few things that I want to emphasize. First is this is a term that was first coined by Dr. Linnea Airy after a series of studies demonstrated how students were storing words in memory. Second thing I want to emphasize is that this is a cognitive process. That means it's happening in the brain via connections that are being made. The connections that are being made start as inefficient connections, and then they are strengthened over time. Now, what connections are we talking about? Well, we're talking about the connections between seeing the spelling of a word, creating the pronunciation or hearing the pronunciation of a word, and knowing the meaning and or use of the word. Okay, so when Dr. Airy explains it, she says spelling, pronunciation, and meaning. Those are the connections. And when you think about the parts of the brain, you're thinking, oh yeah, so at some point, though, it's going to be difficult to make those connections across pathways in the brain. But over time, this really becomes strengthened and becomes an efficient way to create what Dr. Airy calls an amalgam, or you could just think of it as a unit of the word. That unit or knowledge of the word, meaning that you know its spelling, its pronunciation, and its meaning or use, that unit becomes stored in long-term memory so that you can eventually retrieve it automatically. When you hear it, you can then automatically retrieve its spelling or its meaning. Or often in reading, you see it and you can automatically retrieve its pronunciation and you know what the word means or you know its use in the context.
All right, so let's come back to that spelling thing in a minute, because one of the questions that we often get is, can a word be orthographically mapped if kids can't spell it? So we'll come back to that in a second. And as you heard both of us say, so why does this matter? It matters because it is the on-ramp to fluency. And that's why Jan Hasbrook, who many people know as for her contributions to fluency, wrote the foreword for it. It is really the process by which kids can get to reading with efficiency so that comprehension is an outcome. And all of this rests, of course, on this theory of automaticity, that as your process by which you see words and instantly retrieve them off the page is automatic, you're freeing up that cognitive space so that you can focus on what is often more difficult, which is the making meaning process. So let's talk about the question that always comes up is, I walked through this example of, I saw the word, I did a little bit of work, but instantly, after one iteration, the word was orthographically mapped. So the question then is often, well, how many encounters does it take for kids to orthographically map words? And Katie is very careful to remind us that we have to be mindful of how we're using research. And by that, I mean, I'm thrilled we're at a time and place where people are asking for the research and citing the research, but we can't broadly overstate it. So in other words, I'm always suspicious when people say research shows, because research is actually all of these individual studies. And what Katie reminds me of is that these studies under these conditions with these populations and these measures, these are the outcomes, which is very different than saying research shows. So you can see that with these studies under these conditions and these populations, again, happy to share them, the average was typically around 3 to 5-ish exposures for the word. Now, of course, it's not just the quantity of exposures, but it's also the quality of exposures. And we're going to talk next time more about what quality exposures look like. And not surprisingly, our kids who are at risk for reading have more need more repetitions of the word. And that certainly we've all had the experience of working with kids that sometimes it feels like this is the 20th time they've seen the word. What we're well beyond what David Scher said. It's we're well beyond the 4 exposures. What gives? And that's certainly the world that Katie and I are living in, working with the kids who need extra iterations of the word. So lots of us know, of course, Linnea for her just bounty of research, but we're not yet at the place, I think, where her phases of reading are commonly known. I think we're at a pretty good place in the literacy landscape where lots of people know Scarborough's Rope, lots of people know the Simple View, but not everybody yet knows about the phases of word reading. And once you start to understand them, you can really sort of cater your instruction to say, oh, that's why this didn't work for this reader at this particular time. And we also intentionally set up the book according to phases of reading, which there certainly is some overlap with grade levels, but grade levels are relatively arbitrary. We've all decided that if you're 9 years old, you're in 3rd or 4th grade. But now with these phases, we can look for traits, characteristics, behavior, skills that let us tailor our instruction a little bit more than just, oh, this reader is 8 years old. So let's start talking about them and know that areas particular about them being phases and not stages, because phases, of course, implies that there can be some overlap, meaning you don't go to bed as a partial alphabetic kid and wake up the next day as a full alphabetic kid. So let's overview them pretty quickly. I'm going to also show, I believe I've got a graphic from the National Center for Improving Literacy, has a really lovely overview of the phases of reading development, starting with our pre-alphabetic kids, who we used to think of as emergent readers. These are the kids that are living in the world of logographic reading. In other words, they're developing their concepts of print. Their knowledge of the alphabet is probably limited to the alphabet song. These are the kids that think LMNO is one letter. They also think the letter is and Z, which I always used to correct my students. Don't sing the alphabet song with and Z, because then you have kids who think zebra starts with the letter and Z. These are the kids, I'll throw my sister under the bus, as I tend to do when I present. We were driving around with her 3-year-old, and her 3-year-old saw the sign for Krispy Kreme and pointed it out, and she was like, oh my God, he's a genius, he's reading at 3. And of course, I couldn't just be the aunt, I had to be the reading researcher that was like, actually, he's in the logographic phase, and he's using the color, the print, the shape, all of those visual cues to quote unquote read. Our partial alphabetic kids have some early letter sound correspondence. These are our kids that when you see their spelling, it focuses on their salient sounds. So they might spell circus with a C and an R and a K maybe. They tend to leave out the vowels because those vowels are the sounds that sort of float around in the mouth and aren't particularly easy to discriminate in the point of articulation. These are kids that are really working on that phonemic awareness, but are not yet full in their alphabetic knowledge. But they're on their way to developing that to get them to the next phase of full alphabetic knowledge, where they really do have phoneme, grapheme correspondence. However, it's not always accurate. So these are kids that even though they're marking all of the sounds as they spell words, there may be some inaccuracies. But of course, an important point in development to get them on to the consolidated phase where kids are really beginning to start automaticity with that sight word recognition and being more strategic and using larger portions of words than individual phonemes, including syllables and morphemes and all of those sorts of things. And this is the one that I was talking about. This is from, I just screenshot this from National Center for Improving Literacy. I believe Yakov Petr down at Florida State or Florida Center for Reading Research was one of the illustrators or writers of this. I just think it's great. because lets us know how a child in all 4 different phases looks and quote unquote reads the stop sign. So we've got our logographic readers, our pre-alphabetic kids who are not reading, but just using the sign, the visual cues, and they are living in the world of concepts of print, how to handle print, top to bottom, left to right, all of those things. Our partial kids may recognize a letter or two, typically beginning and ending sounds, but certainly not attending to the middle of words. Now, when they're into the full alphabetic, they are getting all of the sounds, but not yet with entire accuracy. So you tend to see a lot of errors in short vowels here, whereas our kids who are in the consolidated phase can be more strategic and sophisticated in those larger units, which again, of course, enables that fluency to get them to comprehension. So how do we all know this? Really looking at writing samples is such a treasure trove of letting us know where kids are with regard to their phases. I love, love, love looking at pre-alphabetic kids. When I was a student at University of Virginia, we would call this symbol salad because it's kind of a mix of there's some letters maybe, there's some numbers, there's some random stuff, and this is the one of my favorite experiences where you compliment whoever this writer was and say, tell me what you wrote, and they read back this whole story that you could never have quote unquote read from the page. And you see the teacher doing a lovely job with a sticky note here. My daughter, when she was in 1st grade, she was riding her scooter. Great example of salient sounds and scooter. I'm really focusing on those ones that are prominently felt. Moving on to the full stage, now you can see a great example of chased, 5th or 6th line. She's marking all of the sounds, but not yet with accuracy. And then finally, you can see the sophistication of the consolidated phase. So one of the things that I value most from my training at the University of Virginia was the focus on student spelling and authentic writing as really being a huge window into their linguistic understanding. If I knew nothing about a kid, you gave me random 10-year-old and said, you've got 2 minutes. What are you going to do? The first thing I would get is a spelling inventory, and then I would get an oral reading fluency, because with those 2 measures, I'm going to get a predictor of their comprehension. I'm going to get the linguistic phonics features that they need, because it is really so, so essential. So you can take a look at these. These are some of Katie's daughter's writing. It's always great when you can take these samples from your own child so you don't have to get permissions. My 15-year-old is not so eager in this anymore of the, she's aged past this. But you can see her moving from the pre-stage in box 4 to the partial stage in box 1, where she's not marking all the sounds, then moving on to daddy, and then finally love. And fortunately, Linnea gave us the blessing for this book and basically said, my ideas, yep, you're giving them in the accurate way, and most importantly, you're giving them in a way that teachers have the instructional implications, which is again where we're going to go for our next time. So the one thing that I just want to show out in this diagram is you've seen that illustration already. Take a look at the full stage. You see that there's an arrow that's gray. What does that mean? That means a child is marking the sound, but they're not yet doing it with accuracy. So this is where we tend to see a lot of vowel confusion. Sometimes we see confusion between voiced and voiceless, or we start to see those errors in the point of articulation. But a big development, a big progress from the partial stage where they're just getting beginning and ends. Next up, they're getting the middle, but not yet with accuracy. So I alluded earlier to the question about, well, can a kid have a word orthographically mapped if they can't spell it? And really, Katie and I would argue no, because it is essential your word knowledge as Charles Perfetti talks about in Lexical Quality hypothesis depends not only on your ability to lift words off the page, but also to put them on the page and in terms of encoding. And so I had always heard when I was a student that reading and writing are two sides of the same coin. I believe that Tim Shanahan kind of clarified this a little bit and said, they're actually really drawing on the same well of linguistic knowledge. And they're reciprocal, but not interchangeable. And by that, we know that spelling is more difficult than reading. Spelling involves a component of phonological memory. So if I were to put the word chrysanthemum up on the screen and flash it in half a second, you'd be able to decode it. But then if I asked you to spell it, you'd likely be like, I know there's a U somewhere, there's an E. Again, memory, that phonological memory. You also have to do the hard work of you hear a long A sound and you want to spell it, but you have to sort of sort through your lexicon and be like, which way am I representing it? Of the 6 long A markers are there? So instead, we like to talk about this, and this is how Katie explains it to her students, that they're kind of a rubber band. The relationship between reading and spelling is kind of this rubber band that we want to be mindful of does not overextend in one direction so that it snaps. And by this, what we mean is it's very typical in like 2nd to 4th-ish grade where kids' reading outpaces their spelling. And here's where we kind of got to pump the brakes a little bit and let the spelling catch up with the reading. Increase our spelling instruction, hold students accountable for spelling the words they read and reading the words they spell, because otherwise that reading is going to progress so much and we're going to see the snap from the tension of the rubber band being pulled in one direction. And I see this a fair amount in schools. My question is always, well, is there a spelling component? It's great to have a whole library of decodable texts, but if they can't then take whatever decodable linguistic feature you're working on and put it on the page, that transfer isn't going to be there, and we're not going to make sure that the rubber band holds equal tension. So I'm not necessarily saying that spelling needs to be a whole nother standalone program or component, but more that there needs to be a mindfulness around the reciprocal nature, and that kids should be, for the most part, be able to spell the words they read and read the words they spell. So let's clarify a little bit of the language that sometimes gets interchanged. I often hear that sight words and high frequency words are the same thing when they're really not interchangeable. I love this quote from Jan, who reminds us that every word wants to be a sight word. Well, why does that matter? If every word is a sight word, like it is for you and me, then what can we get to? We can get to fluency. But we get into more of the weeds when we start talking about function words and regular words and irregular words. Our sight words, of course, are the ones that are highly personal to each reader. My sight words are probably different than your sight words, but high frequency words there is a commonality. Most of us know them as the Dolch list or the Fry list. There was a great article in last spring's Reading Teacher Journal where some folks looked at the Dolch list and the Fry list and basically said, okay, these came from decades ago, the list of words that were most commonly occurring in the body of literature then. And kids today don't read the same stuff as they did then. How have the words changed? And I can never remember like which words got bumped off the list and which words got added, but it's kind of a wild idea. I mean, to me, it's sort of like, it's not research I would be enthralled with, sort of tallying how many times the word with and how many times the word there appears. But that's the work that many linguistics do. And Katie really is sort of the guru around helping us understand the difference between regular spelled words and the irregularly spelled words. And one of the things that I'm doing so much now in schools is helping them choose high quality instructional materials. And the Reading League has amazing resources around that. But one of the things that I always look at is their scope and sequence and how they handle high frequency words. In other words, if I am seeing a program that has can and but not at the same time as their CVC words, then that's a red flag to me. If you're teaching, and I know that there are some words that you have to teach just for semantic glue and things like that, but for the most part, these high frequency words are decodable. In fact, there's a lovely article that, and that Katie also added to this body of literature. They went, what I believe I've got some of the citations around it. They show how regular high frequency words actually are. So I'm actually pulling from this article the regularity of high frequency words, and that when we as teachers have strong linguistics and phonetic skills, we can analyze words and reorganize them and figure out what is regular, what is temporarily irregular, and what is permanently irregular. So what did they do? They took the 315 Dolch words and used most common phonograms and spelling rules to analyze them. And they found that actually less than 1% of these words were so irregular that they kind of needed to be memorized. And so reminds me of one of the things that I had huge misconceptions with when I was in the classroom. I would tell my kids like, oh, the English language is just so many irregularities, or so many rule breakers, so many exceptions, you just have to memorize it. Well, really, nope, you have to map it, because 99% actually are regular. And one of the things that we love to do with teachers is really help teachers reorganize high frequency word lists so that they align to whatever your scope and sequence is. We're actually working on a compendium resource around this because not everybody has that knowledge. It takes some linguistic skills, which is not yet commonplace in every teacher preparation program yet. We have to be able to say, is this temporarily irregular? Is it regular? Or is it entirely irregular? And again, very few of them are permanently irregular. That's the good news. So again, a little bit more about the why of orthographic mapping. I love this quote, an oldie but a goodie from 1980. Keith Stanovich was telling us he was talking around orthographic mapping before Linnea had ever even written about it, and is basically saying, in a nutshell, all of this stuff boils down to you are a stronger reader if you can quickly recognize words, right? So think about like all of the work that we do with our struggling readers, and it all boils down to this: rapid word recognition. And I am spending a lot of time now in middle schools. And middle schools, in terms of the science of reading, at least in New York, I'm in New York, which is a very local control state. We don't have sort of approved lists. It's because it's local control, there can be lots of issues with equity and things like that. And so I'm in all these middle schools, and middle school teachers will come up to me and be like, I'm the biology teacher. They can't understand the chapter about photosynthesis, or I'm the social studies teacher and I want to teach about Mesopotamia, but they can't decode it. Teach me a comprehension strategy. And I'm like, you don't want to hear what I'm going to say, because I'm going to say it goes back to their word identification knowledge. These kids don't have enough words that are orthographically mapped. And what we're seeing is the consequence that their comprehension fails. And all the teachers can identify that. And I wish it were a comprehension strategy, because in many ways that's a whole lot easier to like, but really it's just a band-aid on a gaping wound. And if we don't address the cause of the gaping wound, which is this notion in the decoding threshold, and if you haven't read that paper, it came out, I believe, spring of 2024, that basically points out this entire thing, that if kids don't have enough words orthographically mapped, comprehension will always be a struggle for them. And that brings up a whole nother cascade of questions. What do you do with middle school readers who don't have enough words orthographically mapped? It's a lot easier to sort of do the, oh, well, we'll teach them a comprehension strategy, but again, band-aid on a gaping wound. And I believe this image I stole from 95% group, maybe, I can't remember. But I love that for the first time ever, not first time ever, but the first time in my knowledge, I was seeing orthographic mapping be an identifying issue in reading difficulties. I had never seen anything that pointed out orthographic mapping as a distinct contributing factor to kids' comprehension issues. And I would love to say, so I started out by saying, like, for adults, it's like 50,000 words. We know that it's about 10,000 words by the end of middle school. Now, I wish we had the data to go back and say, well, what does that mean for fourth grade? And what's that mean for second grade? We're not there yet. And again, these are all approximations, but you can see sort of how robust kids' body of knowledge should be. I will also say that if you're interested in the sophistication of multisyllabic words that happen in grades 4 and 5, and then of course through middle school. A recent Melissa and Lori podcast with Brendan Chandler does an amazing job of talking about that. He's just, I think, really somebody to watch in terms of his contributions around helping us understand the complexity of multisyllabic word identification for upper grade readers. So as I come to the end of my time, so Katie and I scoured these two resources, which are not yet commonplace and should be. I don't like to say they're free because your taxpayer dollars paid for them. So you might as well take advantage of them and access them on the IES website. This is from the What Works Clearinghouse. The green one is foundational skills, K through 3, and then the yellowish one is reading interventions 4 through 9. So it looks, of course, at fluency and vocabulary. But we basically started here. In addition to all of Linnea's research, what are we going to do? How are we going to create an instructional protocol that's grounded in the research to help kids encode and decode efficiently and effectively so that they can get to fluency and comprehension? And our resources come from these two things. So let me pause here and see if there are any questions that popped up. We've got a couple minutes as well, and I will continue to share our contact information. But if you have not already scrolled up, I will also encourage you to scroll up in the meeting chat, because we have a PDF that's a handout that you can just download. And thank you to those of you who are linking the IES things. And I'm going to put the name that I just talked about, Brennan Chandler. His research, he did this amazing meta-analysis on spelling. Wow, do I sound like a geek? Amazing meta-analysis. And he was on the Melissa and Lori Loves Literacy. So as a teaser for next time, I will, of course, brush up a little bit of this, like do the 5-minute flyover for orthographic mapping for folks who didn't see the first go around. But then in the next version, we're really going to dig into, we took those IES guides to come up with this protocol. What is the protocol? What does it look like? How do I know which activities to use for which kids? And we've got lots of video demonstrations of this as well that we'll focus on next time. So please feel free, if you've got questions, we've got a couple minutes, either put them in the chat or feel free to come off mute if people can. I don't know if they can, and ask any questions or anything.
I think we have time just for one question, Dr. So Evelyn put in the chat, like, should students in middle school readers, or should students in middle school be taught orthographic mapping systematically? And would teaching phonology when they're much older be very tough if their phonics knowledge is poor?
Oh, can I pass and get an easier question? This is where we need to have interventions that are really robust in the components of orthographic mapping, which are phonology, orthography, and language comprehension. So, and I think there's a lot of like little tweaks that we can also do as well. In middle schools, I wish every single middle school, I wish every teacher, anytime they were showing or introducing a vocabulary word would have kids say the word. I'm always surprised that vocabulary instruction is a silent sort of thing. The teacher will say it or the students will write it down. If you're not getting the phonology of the word, A, you're overriding that whole part of the brain, and B, how are you going to ever use it? So it looks like in a middle school classroom, the word is cuneiform. Say the word with me, cuneiform. Turn to your partner, say the word cuneiform. That's something that a teacher can do if they are a 7th grade social studies teacher, or they can do with their, mitosis, say mitosis. And so I think that that's a super important thing. Is it possible to orthographically map a word that is a nonsense word? I don't know any of science that has done it, because the issue, next time we'll talk about function words, which I do not want to give the message that function words are not are nonsense words. They are, but function words have no meaning. You're sort of, if you think of orthographic mapping as a 3-legged stool, one leg is the orthography, one leg is the phonology, one leg is the semantics or the meaning. You're kicking that away. And so if you're kicking away the leg of the stool in nonsense words, that is the semantics, because it doesn't have a meaning, Zibnig doesn't mean anything. So I can't orthographically map it. I may have visually memorized it and the sound, but that's different than mapping it.
Thank you. That's all the time that we have this afternoon, but we just wanted to give our sponsor, Zaner Bloser, an opportunity to share some of the wonderful resources that they have in supporting reading in Virginia. And so, be happy to present. And introduce.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I said, perfect. This is great. So hi, everyone. My name is Angela Camerata. I am the National Literacy Consultant for Super Kids Reading Program in Zaner Bloser. I just want to extend a heartfelt thank you to both Dr. Molly Ness and to you for joining today's webinar as we expand our understanding of the orthographic mapping process and best practices for making words stick. So grounded in the same scientifically based reading research Dr. Ness shared, the Super Kids Reading Program helps to support implementation of this process by integrating what we know about evidence-based best practices for early literacy instruction with high-quality instructional materials and engaging interactive approaches to making reading fun. As you can see here in this slide, Super Kids is built on 5 evidence-based principles that engage children through motivating characters and stories that get students excited about learning, a daily instructional path that provides explicit systematic instruction in mastering word decoding through intentional and consistent practice, progressing from simple to complex concepts to support fluency. And then the program also integrates reading, writing, speaking, and listening to build those language comprehension skills holistically, while those decodable texts promote practice and application of accurate decoding habits, like we've been chatting with Dr. Ness about. The instruction also is tied to meaningful themes that we call big topics to help develop both that breadth and depth of knowledge essential for reading comprehension. Go ahead. You can switch to the next. There we go. Crafted specifically for our K-2 students and how they learn, Super Kids lessons are organized into 3 key strands: word work, reading, and writing. And each strand is intentionally designed to complement and reinforce the others, with skills overlapping and integrating across strands to provide that cumulative opportunities for application. So this consistent structure also helps both educators and students know what to expect each day during their reading block. Because the Super Kids Reading Program is a comprehensive English language arts curriculum, instruction builds and strengthens those foundational skills and supports the development of students' knowledge, vocabulary, and writing to grow their confidence as readers. Super Kids Daily Instruction in Foundational Word Reading provides students with repeated opportunities to identify and decode words through application and practice in phonetically controlled text, to really support the development of that automaticity and fluency as we're discussing again with Dr. Ness. So this word study approach, which is close to one of the steps that Dr. Ness uses in her mapping process. Not only expands students' sight vocabulary, but also strengthens their ability to derive meaning from text, empowering them to really master those new skills and progress in their reading development. So through this approach, students analyze and explore words to uncover consistencies within our spelling system. And then this focus on patterns and principles really builds those transferable word knowledge skills that students can apply across all reading and writing experiences. So starting in kindergarten, let's switch. So starting in kindergarten, Super Kids utilizes a multisensorial approach to help all students master those key skills through that repeated exposure to important concepts and multiple ways to practice them. So similar to Dr. Ness's see and say step, students begin by identifying the target phoneme articulation in spoken language, and then connect that sound directly to both upper and lowercase forms of the letter. And then this learning is then extended within the program by having students produce the letter sound in speech by naming and discussing items that begin with the sound, and then practice that formation of the letter during explicit instruction in handwriting, because we know that's also part of that foundational skills learning. Instruction throughout the week provides continuous opportunities for teachers to explicitly teach those new spelling rules and model how to apply them when decoding and encoding, which is similar to the segment and spell step within words, making words stick. So students also receive modeled and guided instruction as they practice and apply their new learning using their word work skills, which also feature the Super Kids characters to help engage children as they learn. So as Dr. Ness shared, this practice continues to support that orthographic mapping by really building that accuracy and automaticity, setting the foundation for recognizing words by sight with that minimal effort. In first grade, students learn more complex spelling patterns and phonetic and structural patterns to decode and encode longer and more complex words, so that by second grade, students can consolidate the phonetic skills they've developed in previous years while reviewing and reinforce those learned sound spelling patterns with the focus on automaticity and fluency in grade level text. Along with the pattern word, Super Kids instruction also uses sound mapping routines to encode irregular words, which we call memory words. Instruction focuses on that mapping of the parts of the irregular words that students know, and circling the parts that are irregular or have not yet been explicitly taught. So this encourages children to reinforce and apply those habits as they expand their habit of decoding instead of merely memorizing that whole word. Resources like decodable word lists support scaffolded practice at the letter, sound, word, phrase, and sentence levels to support accuracy, and practice automaticity and fluency using blending and decoding instructional routines. These lists align with the cumulative sequence of the phonics and structural analysis skills explicitly taught within the program as well. As students learn to master the alphabetic code, they're given immediate opportunities to apply those skills in cumulatively decodable fiction and nonfiction texts. This really ensures that students develop that habit of decoding words based on letter-sound correspondence and building those neural pathways essential for accurate and fluent reading, as we talked about at the beginning of our discussion. So through systematic instruction, students really gain the phonetic tools needed to unlock every word they encounter without relying again on illustrations or context clues. So this strong lesson to text alignment really pairs well with truly engaging content, which is unique to Super Kids and rapidly accelerates students' reading progress. We know that reading is more than decoding words on a page. Early literacy support is key to a child's long-term academic success, which really builds those essential skills in language acquisition, word recognition, and reading comprehension. So that by grade 3, students need that strong foundation in those areas, including a deep understanding of that alphabetic code and strategic language and background knowledge to really support their understanding of what they read. The Super Kids reading program is purposely designed to develop these skills in K through 2, making it easier for teachers to make every minute of their language arts block count and help to create thriving readers and writers. So we invite you to access this QR code for a link to our daily instructional plan, which really outlines how Super Kids integrates those language arts within and across grade levels, really detailing instructional focus, time, settings, and materials used within the word work reading and writing strands. And it also includes information on differentiated instructional resources, as well as formal and informal assessments that are included in the program. So this is just a small glimpse into how the Super Kids Reading Program drives student success through research-based high-quality instruction in a fun and engaging environment. Please, there's so much more to discover. We'd love to show you how Super Kids can transform learning and unlock your students' full potential. You can contact us to learn more or visit us at zahnerbloser.com. And again, I want to thank you for joining us today, and many thanks to Dr. Molly Ness for the excellent content she presented. Please be sure to answer the quick poll question as you leave the webinar to let Zahner Bloser know how we can support you. Thanks again, and have a great evening.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. I know we are going slightly over, but please hang on for the final push. Just 3 more minutes, I promise. Before we wrap up today, I also would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to Molly Ness for guiding us through this powerful book study and for deepening our collective understanding of the reading brain and shamelessly geeking out over orthographic mapping with us. Your expertise and passion inspires educators, and we are so honored to have you join us this evening. And we can't wait to hear more on the trifecta through the trifecta of this 3-part series. We want to also sincerely thank our event sponsor, Zahner Bloser, for their generous support in making tonight's learning opportunity with Dr. Ness even possible. We value your continued partnership and commitment to strengthening literacy instruction for all students. To all of our TRL Virginia members and folks who showed up tonight, thank you for your engagement. We look forward to part 2 of this book study and hope to see everyone back on January 7th. And if you are not already a member, please use the QR code on the screen to join. Membership is free for 2025-26. Additionally, if you're curious about how to assume a more active role with the Reading League Virginia, you'll also find a link to express interest in joining one of our committees, such as events, membership, or publicity. That said, we are also eager to continue expanding our network of regional ambassadors across the Commonwealth who work in tangent with our publicity committee. If you'd like to join the team and help us share our mission and promote upcoming events, there's a QR code for that as well. Okay, just a couple more quick announcements here. As we head into the upcoming holiday season, we'd love for you to join us in spreading literacy joy through the Give the Gift of Reading initiative. This is a meaningful way to advance literacy by donating to the Reading League Virginia. And a shout out to one of our amazing sponsors, PAF, who will be matching up to $300 of gifts received. Please be on the lookout for both Giving Tuesday as well as our December event with PAF. But don't feel the need to wait to donate if you want to capture this QR code now. Okay, so we also have a big announcement before we close out this evening. TRL Virginia will host our very first in-person conference on February 12th, where we are gearing up for an exciting lineup of speakers on topics related to both decoding and comprehension for an all-day event at George Mason University. Please save the date. More details and registration information will be shared soon, as well as a call for proposals. Even more reason you should become a member so you don't miss the announcement. Or you can find us on social media. We regularly post our events on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, just to name a few platforms. And lastly, don't forget to check out our merch available on our website. As you are considering donating for Giving Tuesday, also consider gifting yourself with some new TRL Virginia swag. Thank you all again for spending this time with us. Before you head off, be sure to grab the link for our event survey and access to your PD certificate in the chat. We appreciate all that you do, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Take care.